Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise, break down complex topics, and, well, make them really stick. Today, we're diving deep into something absolutely fundamental for nursing: patient safety and quality. If you're heading into nursing, or honestly, even if you've just been a patient, this is critical stuff. Our guide for this is The Fundamentals of Nursing, the 11th edition by Potter, Perry, Stockert, and Hall. Solid source. So, our plan. We'll pull out the core ideas: patient care, making good clinical decisions, safety rules, and really connect them to what you'll see day to day. Hospitals, clinics, even home care. We'll walk through it like you're right there.
Absolutely. And patient safety, it's not just, a buzzword. It's a major national health priority. Nurses are right at the heart of it.
Yeah.
The World Health Organization, the WHO, they put it simply. It's about preventing errors and harm linked to healthcare. The real takeaway is building this culture of safety, being proactive, not just reacting after the fact.
Okay, let's unpack that. A safe environment in healthcare. It's more than just physical safety, right? It's about feeling psychologically safe, too. Freedom from injury, both kinds. And that really hits basic survival needs, like Maslow talked about. If you don't feel safe, nothing else matters as much.
Exactly. And think about how basic needs connect to safety. Take oxygen. Sure, we give it, but it's highly flammable. That's a huge risk, especially at home if someone smokes. Big danger. And then there's carbon monoxide, CO, silent killer. Comes from bad heating systems. The symptoms are tricky nausea, feeling dizzy, so it's really insidious. Then nutrition, simple food safety, right? Storing food properly, cooking it right. Nurses have a big role teaching patients this, especially when they go home, to avoid things like E. coli. And don't forget temperature, extreme heat or cold, heat stroke, hypothermia, older adults, babies, people with chronic issues, they're way more vulnerable.
Right. So those are the basic needs. What about everyday hazards? Things like car crashes, falls. They seem to top the list for unintentional injuries in the source material.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere. Let's look at a couple. Motor vehicle accidents, the risks change with age. For teenagers, it's often underestimating danger, speeding, texting while driving,
Ugh.
and frustratingly, not always wearing seatbelts.
Mm.
For older adults, vision changes, maybe slower reflexes, cognitive issues can increase risk, but we can help. Things like reviewing meds for drowsiness, getting eyes checked, maybe sticking to daytime driving.
Practical tips, good. What about poisoning?
Right, poisoning, basically any substance that messes with your health.
Mm.
At home, often medicines, cleaning stuff. Toddlers, preschoolers, super high risk because they explore everything with their mouths, and those little button batteries, extremely dangerous if swallowed. Key takeaway.
Huh.
Have the poison control number handy. It's 1-800-222-1222. Best resource nationwide.
Got it. 1-800-222-1222. Okay, and falls. You mentioned they're a huge issue.
Huge, especially for older adults. The thing is, falls are usually multifactorial. It's rarely just one single cause. Think about it like a perfect storm. Maybe someone has muscle weakness, they're on several meds, making them dizzy, that's polypharmacy. Maybe their blood pressure drops when they stand up, which we call orthostatic hypotension.
Okay.
And then, back home, they trip on a throw rug because the lighting's bad. See? Multiple things lining up. Agencies like the Joint Commission, TJC, they track fall rates very closely.
That perfect storm idea really clarifies it. So we have environmental stuff, basic needs.
Yeah.
What about the person themselves? How do individual characteristics affect safety?
Yeah, that's critical. Risks change across the lifespan. For babies and toddlers, it's choking hazard, those button batteries again, because they put things in their mouths. Move up to school-age kids, and you worry more about playground or sports injuries, maybe bullying. With adolescents, they're seeking independence. So risks shift towards things like substance use, driving issues, unfortunately, suicide risk. Recognizing warning signs is key for nurses, and for older adults is often those physical changes, polypharmacy again, maybe cognitive decline like dementia, which can lead to wandering, all increasing fall risk. The point is, your safety assessment has to match their developmental stage.
Makes sense.
And beyond age, there are individual risk factors, things like impaired mobility, muscle weakness, coordination problems, major fall risk factor. Or if someone has sensory or cognitive issues, bad eyesight, hearing loss, maybe confusion from delirium or dementia, they might not see a hazard or be able to call for help. Also, just a lack of safety awareness. Maybe someone doesn't know to lock up cleaning supplies or check expiration dates. You can't assume knowledge. Assessing and educating, that's the nurse's job.
Okay, so individual factors meet the healthcare setting. This is where things like medical errors come in, which we hear so much about. How do institutions try to manage these bigger risks? It's not just about telling people, be careful, right?
Exactly. It's about systems. Regulatory bodies play a huge role. The National Quality Forum, or NQF, sets priorities and flags what they call serious reportable events. Think operating on the wrong leg or a major medication error. Really bad stuff.
Wow.
And then there are never events from places like CMS Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. These are things so preventable, like a serious pressure injury developing in the hospital or a central line infection, that the hospital doesn't get paid if they happen.
Ah, the money factor.
Right. That financial pressure creates a huge focus on prevention, and nurses are central to that prevention. To get ahead of problems, places use failure mode and effect analysis, FMEA. It's like looking ahead to see where things could go wrong, and when something does happen, you file an incident report, not for blame. It's confidential, used for a root cause analysis, figuring out what system issues contributed so we can fix the system. It fosters that blame-free safety culture.
Okay, proactive and reactive systems.
Yeah, and then you have risks from procedures, maybe rushing leads to a med error, or from equipment like a faulty IV pump. Sticking to protocols, minimizing distractions, using timeouts before procedures to double-check everything, all vital. And for staff, there's risk from chemical exposure like chemo drugs. That's where material safety data sheets, MSDSs, come in. They tell you the risks and how to handle chemicals safely.
So let's circle back to falls, but in the hospital or clinic, still a top problem.
Absolutely. Still number one for adverse events. You've got the patient factors, intrinsic risks like weakness or confusion, but also extrinsic factors, things in the environment like poor lighting, call bell out of reach, clutter. So we use tools, validated fall risk assessment scales like the Morse Fall Scale, to score a patient's risk level. And critically, we use universal fall precautions. These apply to every single patient, no matter their score. Basics like showing them the room, making sure the call light works and it's right there, bed low, brakes locked, non-slip socks or shoes on. Simple but effective.
Universal precautions, I like that. What about workplace violence? That seems like a growing concern.
It is, and it's a spectrum from yelling and verbal abuse right up to physical assault. It can come from patients, visitors, sometimes even coworkers. Nurses need to recognize those predictive behaviors, someone getting louder, glaring, pacing, using abusive language.
Yeah.
The crucial skill here is de-escalation, staying calm, being non-judgmental, respecting their space, using neutral body language, focusing on their feelings, setting clear limits. It's a real skill.
Definitely a skill. Okay, that's a massive landscape of risks and systems. So let's bring it right down to the nurse at the bedside or in the home. How does the nursing process, assessment, diagnosis, planning, implementation, evaluation guide safe practice day to day?
Great question. It all starts with assessment, gathering information. And first, try to see it through the patient's eyes. What are their worries about safety? What are their values? What have they experienced before? Talking with family is key too, especially if there are language or cultural differences.
Right, getting their perspective.
Then, the nursing history and physical exam, we get their medical background, medications, look for those fall risk factors. And a really important point, observe their mobility. Don't just ask, can you, okay, watch them move. People often overestimate their abilities.
Good tip.
Let's use our case study, Mrs. Cohen. She's 78, home after a stroke affecting her left side. Daughter Meg helps out. Kylie, the home health nurse, visits. First thing Kylie sees, throw rugs everywhere, piles of magazines, dim lighting, immediate red flags for falls.
Okay.
Mrs. Cohen says she needs help with meds and wants to get stronger. She mentions falling 4 months ago, luckily no injury. Then Kylie does her physical check. Left leg is weak, hand grasp is weak, and her left foot kind of drags when she uses her walker. Kylie puts it together, age, stroke effects, that past fall, the current weakness, plus those hazards in the house. High fall risk. A good home environment assessment means checking lighting, floors, furniture setup. We might use the SPLAT acronym for past falls, symptoms before the fall, previous falls, location, activity at the time of day, and any trauma or injury.
SPLAT, okay.
And reviewing meds is huge. Sometimes we use the Beers criteria. It lists meds that can be risky for older adults.
So you've gathered all this info on Mrs. Cohen. What's the next step in the nursing process?
Next is analysis and nursing diagnosis. We look at all the data, find patterns, and form nursing diagnoses, like risk for fall. But it's not just a label. It's tied directly to the risk factors we found, the weakness, the rugs, the history, the key idea. Our interventions have to target those specific risk factors.
Got it.
For Mrs. Cohen, Kylie identifies risk for fall based on her age, history, mobility issues, and the home hazards. She also sees impaired mobility due to the stroke weakness. And because Mrs. Cohen wants to learn and improve, Kylie adds health-seeking behavior.
Okay, diagnosis made. Then comes planning and outcomes identification.
Exactly. Now we plan. keeping the patient at the center. What are their conditions? How severe are the risks? What resources do we have? We work with the patient, family, maybe bring in PT or OT, to set goals. Goals need to be measurable and realistic. For Mrs. Cohen, Kylie sets an outcome. Patient will not fall in 1 month. Ambitious, maybe, but reflects recovery goals post-stroke. And for the health-seeking behavior, maybe, patient will identify personal fall risks in 1 week. The top priority, preventing falls, given her instability.
Right, prioritize. And then implementation. This is the doing part. What kind of actions do nurses take?
This is where we put the plan into action. At home, fire safety might mean teaching about space heater placement, checking smoke detectors, and the pass and mnemonic for fire extinguishers. Pull, aim, squeeze, sweep.
Pass, got it.
Food safeties. Remember, wash, separate, cook, chill. Simple stuff. Home fall safety, getting rid of those throw rugs, improving lighting, maybe suggesting an alert device. With Mrs. Cohen, Kylie works with her and Mag. They remove the rugs. Kylie explains that a new blood pressure med might cause dizziness, so Mrs. Cohen needs to stand up slowly. Crucially, she explains how the stroke affects her walking and refers her to physical therapy. It's partnership.
That partnership seems key. What about in hospitals?
In acute care, fall prevention often involves things like hourly rounding, checking on patients regularly to meet needs before they try to get up unsafely, using standardized yellow wristbands to quickly show who's at high risk for falls, tailoring interventions, maybe having someone dangle their feet before standing, using a gait belt.
Okay. What about restraints? That's a tricky area.
Very tricky. Restraint should be a last resort. Only temporary for confused patients may be pulling at tubes. The focus is always on alternatives first. Can we distract them? Have someone sit with them? Change the environment. Physical restraints have serious risks. Pressure injuries, pneumonia, agitation, even death. There are strict rules, doctor's order needed, specific time limits, no as needed, or pain orders. Close monitoring is essential.
Okay. And for fires in hospitals?
We use the ARACE mnemonic. Rescue anyone in immediate danger, activate the alarm, confine the fire by closing doors, and extinguish only if it's small and safe to do so.
RACE. Good one to remember. And seizures.
If someone has a seizure, priority is safety. Stay with them, keep them safe by moving objects away, turn them on their side for airway protection, and never put anything in their mouth. That's a dangerous myth.
Stay safe side. Got it. Wow, implementation covers a lot, which brings us to the last step, evaluation. How do you know if the plan actually worked?
Evaluation is crucial. Did we meet the outcomes we set? And again, involve the patient. Ask them, do you feel safer now? Did this help? If the outcome wasn't met, say, the patient did fall, we have to ask why. What factors do we miss? What needs to change in the plan? It's a cycle.
So back to Mrs. Cohen.
Right. Kylie uses Teachback. She asks Mrs. Cohen to explain her fall risks. Mrs. Cohen mentions the stroke weakness and her past fall. Kylie gently prompts, and Mrs. Cohen adds her age and the dizziness from the medication.
Ah, teach back. Good technique.
Yeah. It confirms understanding. Kylie reinforces the plan, keep working with PT, be careful when standing, and schedules her next visit. It empowers Mrs. Cohen to be part of her own safety plan.
That's a fantastic walkthrough. It really shows how patient safety isn't just one thing. It's woven through everything a nurse does in every setting. The level of critical thinking is, well, it's immense.
It really is constant vigilance, constant learning. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening,
Correct.
something to chew on. How will you, in your own practice, actively build that culture of safety, even when things get busy or unexpected? Or maybe more importantly, how will you truly empower your patients to be partners in keeping themselves safe?
That's a great question to leave us with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into patient safety and quality. Keep digging, keep learning, and we'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.